My sister demanded I give her my inheritance because she was the only girl in the family. My sister Larissa was 3 years older than me and had been telling me I was worth less than her since we were children. She said girls were more important than boys. She said girls needed to be protected and boys did not. She said the family would always come together for her and I should just accept my place at the edge of it. Our parents never corrected her. Our father thought it was sweet. Our mother said Larissa was just a delicate girl and I should not take it personally. I took it personally every single time. Growing up, Larissa got everything she wanted. She got the bigger bedroom, she got the newer bicycle, she got the car when she turned 16, while I had to wait until I could buy my own at 19. Our parents said Larissa needed these things because the world was harder on girls and she deserved to feel safe. They said I was a boy and boys made their own way, so I did not need as much. I learned early that arguing was pointless. I just worked harder. I got a job at 15 and saved every penny. I got scholarships to pay for college because our parents said they could only afford to help one child and Larissa needed it more. I graduated with honors and got a good job in accounting while Larissa dropped out after 2 years and bounced between dead-end positions. None of that mattered to our parents. Larissa was still the golden child because Larissa was the daughter. Our grandmother was different. Grandma Faye was our mother's mother and she had opinions about how her daughter raised us. She told our mother that spoiling Larissa would ruin her. She told our mother that I deserved the same opportunities as my sister. She told our mother that a boy needed just as much love and support as a girl and pretending otherwise was cruel. Our mother ignored her. Grandma Faye did not ignore me. She called me every Sunday to ask about my life. She came to my college graduation even though our parents said it was too far to drive. She visited my first apartment and told me she was proud of the man I had become. She said I had the backbone she always wished she had at my age. She said she wished she had someone in her corner back then, the way she wanted to be in mine. When Grandma Faye got sick 2 years ago, I drove 4 hours every weekend to help take care of her. I cooked her meals and cleaned her house and sat with her while she watched her favorite old movies. Larissa visited twice in 18 months. Both times she asked Grandma Faye for money. Both times she told her no. She said Larissa needed to learn to stand on her own feet. She said she would not enable her laziness. Grandma Faye passed away on a Wednesday morning in April. I was holding her hand when she took her last breath. Larissa showed up late and spent most of the service on her phone. A week later, the lawyer called us for the reading of the will. We all sat in the lawyer's office waiting to hear what Grandma left behind. The lawyer read through the standard parts first. Grandma left some jewelry to our mother. She left some furniture to a cousin who had always admired it. She left a donation to the animal shelter where she used to volunteer. Then the lawyer got to the main assets. Grandma's house was worth about $300,000. Her savings account had another $200,000. She also had a small investment portfolio worth around $150,000. All of it went to me. Every single penny, the house, the savings, the investments, everything Grandma Faye owned was now mine. Larissa stared at the lawyer like she misheard. She asked the lawyer to repeat it. The lawyer repeated it. She asked if there was a mistake. The lawyer said there was no mistake. She asked why she was not included. The lawyer said Grandma Faye left specific instructions. She said Larissa would receive exactly what she earned through her relationship with her. She said that the amount was zero. Larissa exploded. She shot forward across Nathan Powell's desk, both hands slamming down on the polished wood surface hard enough to make the pen holder rattle. I need to see that document myself. Nathan slid the pages across the desk without changing his expression. His movements calm and measured like he dealt with angry people every day. Larissa grabbed the papers and started reading, her finger tracing each line while her mouth moved silently. My mother made a choking sound beside me, and then the crying started. Quiet at first, but getting louder with each breath. My father's face went from normal to pink to deep red in the span of maybe 10 seconds, the color spreading up from his collar to his forehead. I could not move. My hands gripped the arms of my chair, and I just sat there watching my family fall apart over words on paper that Grandma Faye had written months ago. Larissa finished reading and started over from the beginning. Her hands shook enough that the papers rustled. My mother kept crying, and my father kept getting redder, and Nathan just sat there behind his desk with his hands folded, waiting. The office felt too small suddenly, like the walls were closer than they had been 5 minutes ago. The air conditioning hummed, but I felt hot anyway. Larissa read the will a third time before she looked up at me. You manipulated her. Her voice came out rough and accusing. You spent all that time with her, and you poisoned her mind against me. My father jumped in before I could respond. There is no way Mom would do this unless someone convinced her to. You must have told her lies about Larissa. You must have made her think she did not care about her. Nathan cleared his throat, and both of them turned to look at him. Mrs. Faye was mentally sound and fully capable of making her own decisions. I met with her multiple times over the past year to discuss her estate planning. She was very clear about her wishes and her reasoning. Larissa slammed the papers down on the desk. What reasoning? What possible reason could she have? Nathan picked up the will and found a specific page. She stated that you would receive exactly what you earned through your relationship with her. She documented every interaction she had with you for the past 3 years, including the 2 times you visited and asked for money. My father opened his mouth and closed it again. My mother's crying got quieter but did not stop. She begged me from her chair, reaching across to grab my arm. You have to do the right thing here. We are family, and family takes care of each other. You cannot just keep everything when Larissa needs help too. The words hit me wrong because I remembered being 7 years old and asking why Larissa got a new bike when mine was broken, and being told that girls needed things more than boys did. I remembered being 16 and asking why Larissa got a car and being told I was a boy and I would figure it out on my own. I remembered being 19 and asking for help with college and being told they could only afford to help one child and Larissa needed it more. Family takes care of each other. I stood up from my chair and picked up my keys. I need time to process this. My mother started to say something else, but I was already walking toward the door. Larissa shouted after me that I was a selfish thief who stole her birthright. I kept walking. Nathan called my name, but I did not stop until I was in the hallway with the door closed behind me. The drive back to my apartment took 4 hours, and I do not remember most of it. My phone started buzzing before I even got out of the parking lot. I glanced at it at a red light and saw my mother's name, then my father's name, then my mother again. I put the phone in the cup holder and turned the radio up loud enough to drown out the buzzing. The highway stretched out in front of me, and I just drove, my hands tight on the steering wheel and my mind blank. When I finally pulled into my parking spot at my apartment building, I checked my phone. 23 missed calls. 15 from my mother, 6 from my father, 2 from Larissa. I had 1 voicemail. I sat in my car in the dark parking lot and played it. Larissa's voice came through angry but trying to sound reasonable. We need to talk about fixing this situation before it tears the family apart. I want to work this out like adults. Call me back. I deleted the voicemail and got out of the car. She was blaming me for family problems like I was the one who spent 30 years telling her she was better than me because she was born a girl. Inside my apartment, I dropped my keys on the counter and stood in the kitchen with my hands shaking. The anger hit me all at once, hot and overwhelming. I grabbed my phone and called Natalia. She answered on the second ring and I asked if she could come over. She showed up 40 minutes later with 2 bottles of wine and did not ask any questions until we were sitting on my couch with full glasses. I told her everything from the beginning. Grandma Faye's death, the will reading, the inheritance, Larissa's explosion, my parents' reactions, the drive home, the 23 missed calls. Natalia listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she took a long drink of wine. Then she asked me one question. What would your grandmother want you to do with this gift she gave you? I opened my mouth to answer, and then closed it again. Grandma Faye had not just left me money. She had left me proof that I mattered. She had left me validation that I was worthy and loved. She had left me a message that said I deserved good things regardless of what my parents thought. I called Nathan Powell first thing the next morning from my kitchen table with coffee getting cold in front of me. He picked up on the 3rd ring and I asked him about next steps for managing the inheritance. I also asked if Larissa could legally challenge the will. Nathan explained that anyone could file a challenge, but Grandma Faye's will was ironclad. She had documentation of her mental capacity from her doctor. She had written statements explaining her reasoning. She had met with him multiple times over a year to make sure everything was clear and legal. The challenge would fail, but it might take time and cause stress. He recommended I talk to a financial advisor soon to understand the tax implications and investment options. He gave me a name and number for someone he trusted. I wrote it down on a napkin because I could not find paper. My mother called while I was getting ready for work. I almost did not answer, but I knew she would just keep calling. Her voice came through the phone thick with tears. You are destroying this family. You are breaking my heart by being greedy when your sister needs help. I held the phone away from my ear for a second and took a breath. Then I asked her what Larissa needed help with. She said she was $30,000 in credit card debt and had been counting on inheritance money to get back on her feet. I felt something twist in my chest that might have been sympathy, except I remembered Grandma Faye refusing to give Larissa money twice. She had said enabling her irresponsibility was not helping her. She had said she needed to learn to stand on her own feet. My mother kept talking about family and responsibility and doing the right thing, but I was not really listening anymore. My father called that evening with a different approach. His voice had that stern quality he used when he wanted me to know he was serious. He said that as a young woman, Larissa had needs and vulnerabilities I did not understand as a man. He said the house should go to Larissa because she would need it when she got married and started a family. He said I was a man and I would build my own life anyway, so I did not need it. I sat on my couch listening to him explain why my sister deserved my inheritance, and something clicked into place in my head. My father still thought this way after I had been financially independent for years. He still thought this way after Larissa dropped out of college and bounced between jobs. He still thought this way after I graduated with honors and built a career. He would never see me as equal to Larissa, not ever. Charlotte Brick's office was downtown in a building with marble floors and too much glass. She met me in the lobby and shook my hand with a firm grip. Her office had windows overlooking the city, and she offered me coffee before we sat down. She walked me through exactly what I had inherited. The house needed some repairs to the roof and the plumbing, but nothing major. The investments were solid, mostly index funds and bonds that Grandma had been adding to for decades. They needed some rebalancing to be more appropriate for someone my age. The tax implications were significant, but manageable with proper planning. Charlotte spread papers across her desk and explained everything in language I could understand. She treated me like a capable adult making important financial decisions decisions. She did not talk down to me or suggest I hand it all over to keep the peace. After a lifetime of my parents treating me like I was the child who did not deserve investment, sitting in Charlotte's office felt revolutionary. Larissa showed up at my apartment on Saturday morning without calling first. I was still in my pajamas drinking coffee when someone knocked on my door hard enough to make me jump. I looked through the peephole and saw her standing in the hallway. She had driven 4 hours to talk to me. Her face looked calm, almost pleasant, which meant she had switched tactics. I opened the door but left it wide open, unwilling to be alone with her given how she exploded at Nathan's office. She smiled at me and asked if she could come in. I stepped back and gestured to the couch, but I did not close the door. Larissa sat down on my couch and ran her hands through her hair. She looked tired and older than her 33 years. She started talking about the lawyer's office and how she lost control. She said she was sorry for yelling and making a scene. She said she was shocked because she always thought Grandma loved both of us the same amount. Her voice stayed calm and reasonable, like she practiced what to say on the drive over. She said she understood why I was upset, but we needed to think about this situation like adults. She said families should stick together and not let money come between them. She suggested we sell the house and split everything 50-50 because that was what fair siblings would do. She said Grandma probably did not think about how her will would cause problems between us. She said we could fix this ourselves without lawyers or court battles. I sat in the chair across from her and felt something cold settle in my chest. I asked her if she thought fair parents would have treated us equally growing up. Her face went blank for a second. She said that was different. I asked her how it was different. She shifted on the couch and said our parents did the best they could with what they had. She said they had to make choices about where to put their resources. I reminded her that those resources went to her while I worked at 15 to buy my own things. She waved her hand like I was bringing up old history that did not matter anymore. She said we were talking about now, not the past. She said I needed to stop holding grudges and be mature about this situation. I felt my jaw tighten. I told her I was not making any decisions about the inheritance right now. I said I needed time to process everything and figure out what I wanted to do. Her calm mask started to crack. She leaned forward with her elbows on her knees. She said I was being difficult on purpose. She said I got scholarships for college, so I did not need help back then. She said she struggled and deserved support from the family. I stared at her and felt something like amazement at how she could twist reality. She struggled through 2 years of college she barely attended while partying. I worked full-time and maintained honors classes for 4 years. She thought those things were equal. She thought her choice to drop out meant she deserved money more than I did. I stood up and told her she needed to leave my apartment. Her face turned red. She stood up fast enough that the couch moved backward. She said I was going to regret this. She said I was choosing money over family. She said Mom and Dad would never forgive me for this betrayal. She walked to the door and grabbed the handle. She turned back and said her lawyer would be in touch about contesting the will. Then she left and slammed the door hard enough to make the wall shake. I locked the door and leaned against it. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. I was angry at her for thinking I would just hand over Grandma's gift because she showed up and asked nicely. I was angry at myself for the small part of me that felt guilty for saying no. I spent the rest of the weekend going through the documents Nathan gave me. There were bank statements and property deeds and investment portfolios. There were tax documents and insurance policies. Everything was organized in folders with labels and Grandma's neat handwriting. At the bottom of the stack, I found a sealed envelope with my name on it. I recognized Grandma's handwriting immediately. My hands shook as I opened it. The letter was 3 pages long on her good stationery. She started by saying she loved me, and she was sorry she would not be there to see me read this. She said she watched my parents favor Larissa our entire lives. She said it broke her heart to see me work so hard for scraps of approval I never got. She said she tried to talk to my mother about the favoritism, but my mother would not listen. She said she knew I felt like less because of how my parents treated me. She said this inheritance was her way of telling me I was always worthy. She said I was always loved. She said I always deserved good things no matter what my parents thought about me being the boy they could afford to overlook. I sat on my couch and cried for an hour. I cried for Grandma and for the childhood I deserved but never had. I cried for the little boy who worked at 15 because his parents would not buy him a car. I cried for the college student who took out loans while his sister got family money. I kept reading through my tears. Grandma wrote that she hoped this money would give me freedom to build the life I wanted. She said I should never let anyone tell me I mattered less because of what I was born. She said she was proud of the strong man I became despite my parents. She said their limitations were not my fault. Her words felt like a hug from beyond the grave. They gave me strength to face what I knew was coming from my family. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. I would keep it forever. On Monday, I took a personal day from work. I drove 4 hours to Grandma's house with the keys Nathan gave me. The house looked the same as it always had. White siding with blue shutters and a garden full of roses in the front yard. I parked in the driveway and sat in my car for a minute. An older woman came out of the house next door. She was small with white hair and she carried a plate covered in foil. She walked over to my car and I rolled down the window. She said her name was Mrs. Sison and she lived next door to Grandma for 20 years. She said she was glad Grandma left everything everything to me. She said I was the only one who visited and cared about her. She handed me the plate and said she made cookies. She said Grandma talked about me all the time. She said Larissa came by twice in the past year asking Grandma for money. She said both times she left angry when Grandma said no. Mrs. Sison patted my arm and said Grandma made the right choice. Then she went back to her house and I went inside. The house smelled like Grandma's lavender soap and old books. Everything was neat and clean the way she always kept it. I walked through the living room and kitchen and felt her presence everywhere. I started going through her desk in the spare bedroom. I found bills and receipts and old photos. I found a leather journal with her name on the cover. I opened it and saw dates from 5 years ago. She wrote about our family. She wrote about calling my mother to talk about the favoritism. She wrote about my mother making excuses for why Larissa got more. She wrote about refusing to give Larissa money when she asked. She wrote about me visiting every weekend when she got sick. She wrote about being proud of my job and my apartment and my life. Reading her words felt like proof that I was not crazy. Everything I felt about my family was real. She saw it too. She documented it in her own handwriting. I kept reading and found more entries about Larissa. She wrote about her asking for $15,000 for gambling debts. She wrote about telling her to get help. She wrote about her getting angry and not visiting for 8 months. She wrote that she would not enable her problems by giving her money. The context made everything make sense. Grandma did not leave her nothing because she was mean. She left her nothing because she loved her enough to not make her problems worse. My phone rang and I saw my mother's name. I answered and she started talking before I could say hello. She asked what I was doing at Grandma's house without telling the family. Her voice was sharp and angry. I said I was the executor and I had the legal right to be here. I said I needed to secure the property and start managing the estate. She said it was disrespectful to go through Grandma's things without Larissa there. I reminded her that Larissa visited twice in 18 months. She said that did not matter because she was still family. I told her I would call her later and hung up. I kept looking through Grandma's desk. I found more journals going back 15 years. I opened one from when I was in high school. Grandma wrote about my graduation. She wrote about my parents leaving early to go to Larissa's college party. She wrote about how I looked sad when I saw them leave. She wrote about being angry at my mother for missing my speech. I turned pages and found entries about my college graduation. She wrote about my parents saying it was too far to drive. She wrote about going by herself and being proud of me. She wrote about every Sunday when I called to tell her about my life. She wrote about my parents barely asking about me when she talked to them. Her documentation of these patterns over years showed me how deep the problem went. It was not just a few incidents. It was a lifetime of my parents choosing Larissa over me again and again. Grandma saw it all and wrote it down. She left me proof that I was not imagining things or being too sensitive. She left me validation that what I experienced was real and wrong. I locked the journals back in the desk drawer and left the house. My phone rang 3 days later while I was at work. Charlotte's name showed on the screen. I answered and she got straight to business. She needed my signature on documents to set up accounts and transfer the assets from Grandma's estate into my name. The list was long. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, property deeds, tax forms. She said we should meet Wednesday afternoon at her office to handle everything at once. I agreed and wrote the appointment in my calendar. Charlotte's voice stayed professional but kind. She said I was doing well managing all the administrative tasks and I should feel proud of handling everything properly. Then she said something that stuck with me. She said I did not owe anyone explanations about my financial decisions. The money was mine legally and ethically, and I had the right to manage it however I wanted. Her words felt like permission to stop defending myself to my family. I thanked her and hung up, feeling both overwhelmed and grateful. The next morning, I found a thick envelope in my mailbox addressed to Nathan. The return address showed a law firm I did not recognize. I called Nathan and he told me to bring it to his office unopened. I drove over during my lunch break and handed him the envelope. He opened it and read through the papers inside. His expression stayed neutral, but I saw his jaw tighten. He looked up and told me Larissa hired a lawyer named Dominic Fletcher, who was officially challenging the will. The letter claimed I used undue influence over Grandma in her final years to manipulate her into leaving everything to me. It demanded mediation before pursuing litigation. Nathan set the papers down and leaned back in his chair. He said this was a common pressure tactic meant to scare me into settling. The challenge had no merit given all the documentation of Grandma's mental capacity and her clear written explanations of her reasoning. He told me not to engage directly with Larissa or Dominic Fletcher. All communication would go through him from now on. I nodded and felt my stomach twist with anxiety about what came next. That evening, my phone rang and both my parents' names showed on the screen. I answered and heard my father's voice first. He was using his serious tone. He said Larissa's lawyer told them we could avoid court if I just agreed to split things fairly. My mother's voice joined in from speakerphone. She said legal battles would eat up the inheritance and lawyer fees, and I should be smart and compromise now. I asked them why they never thought I deserved equal treatment growing up. My mother said that was not relevant to the current situation. Her words told me everything about their inability to see their own role in this mess. I told them I was following Grandma's wishes as stated in her legal will. If Larissa wanted to waste money on a lawsuit, lawsuit that had no chance of winning, that was her choice. My father's voice got louder. He called me ungrateful and said after everything they did for me, this is how I repay them. I felt anger rise in my chest. I pointed out they paid for Larissa's college while I got scholarships. They gave her a car while I bought my own. They put her needs first, my entire childhood. I asked what exactly I was supposed to be grateful for. My mother started sobbing. My father said I was not welcome at family events until I fixed this mess I created. The call ended with my mother crying in the background. I sat on my couch staring at my phone. They were blaming me for a situation caused by their lifetime of favoritism and Larissa's entitlement. The irony would be funny if it was not so painful. I called Natalia and she came over with takeout. She listened to everything and reminded me that their rejection was about their inability to face their own failures, not about my worth. Her words helped, but the hurt still sat heavy in my chest. On Friday, I met with Sabine Lockhart at her office downtown. Natalia recommended her after I mentioned needing help processing everything. Sabine's office had comfortable chairs and soft lighting. She asked me to tell her what brought me in. I explained the inheritance and the family conflict and how guilty I felt about having so much while Larissa had nothing. Sabine listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said something that shifted my whole perspective. She said I was grieving multiple losses. I was grieving my grandmother. I was grieving the family relationships I thought I had. I was grieving the fantasy that my parents might eventually see me as equal to Larissa. She said the inheritance was not just money. It was proof that at least one person in my family saw my true value. Her words made tears run down my face. Nathan called the following Tuesday. Dominic Fletcher filed the official will contest in probate court. The process would take several months to resolve. Nathan assured me the challenge was baseless, but I should prepare for my family to escalate their pressure tactics as they realized legal action would not work quickly. He recommended I document any harassment or threats in case we needed to pursue a restraining order. That seemed extreme until Larissa started leaving voicemails. The first one was angry. The second one was angrier. By the fourth one, she was yelling that I stole from her and I would regret it. I saved every message and forwarded them to Nathan. My cousin called that Wednesday. She received Grandma's antique dining table and chairs in the will. She said she wanted to apologize for my parents' behavior and tell me she supported my decision to honor Grandma's wishes. She said she witnessed the favoritism growing up and always felt bad for me. She wished she had said something at the time. Her validation meant more than she knew. She mentioned that several other extended family members thought my parents and Larissa were being unreasonable, but they were afraid to speak up. Hearing that I had some family support made me feel less alone. I drove back to Grandma's house on Saturday to continue sorting through her belongings. I found a cardboard box in the hall closet filled with cards and letters. I opened it and saw my handwriting on envelope after envelope. Birthday cards I sent from college, thank you notes for Christmas gifts, postcards from trips I took, letters about my first apartment and my new job. She kept everything. I looked through the whole box and found only 5 items from Larissa, all birthday cards. None had personal messages beyond her signature. The physical evidence of our different relationships with her made me feel less guilty about the inheritance. I was putting the box back when I heard the front door open. I walked into the living room and saw Larissa standing there. She said she had a right to go through Grandma's things too. I told her she needed to leave since she was not the executor and the property was legally mine now. She ignored me and walked toward the bedroom. She started opening drawers and grabbing items. She picked up Grandma's gold watch from the dresser. I told her to put it down because Grandma specifically mentioned in her will that the watch should go to me. She shoved it in her pocket and said it belonged to her. I pulled out my phone and called the police non-emergency line. I asked them to send an officer to remove a trespasser from my property. Larissa's face turned red and she started yelling that I could not do this to her. When the officers arrived, one of them held up his hand and Larissa stopped mid-sentence. The officer asked me if I was the legal owner of this property. I pulled out the will from my bag and showed him the relevant pages. The officer read through it while his partner kept Larissa from moving closer to me. The officer asked if I was the executor. I said yes and showed him Nathan's business card with a note on the back confirming my role. The officer turned to Larissa and told her she needed to leave immediately since this was private property and she did not have permission to be here. Larissa argued that her grandmother's house should belong to the whole family. The officer said the will was clear and she needed to leave now or face trespassing charges. Larissa pulled out her phone and said she was calling her lawyer. The officer said that was fine, but she still needed to leave the property while making that call. Larissa shoved past me toward the door and yelled that I would regret this. She said she was suing me for emotional distress and I stole her inheritance. The officer followed her outside while I stood in the living room shaking. The second officer stayed with me and asked if I was okay. I nodded, but my hands would not stop trembling. The officer asked if this was the first time Larissa showed up uninvited. I said yes, but she had been calling and leaving angry messages. The officer suggested I change the locks right away and consider getting a restraining order if Larissa kept showing up. I had not thought about needing a restraining order against my own sister. The officer said family disputes over inheritance could get ugly fast and it was better to be safe. He gave me his card and said to call if Larissa came back. I thanked him and locked the door after both officers left. I sat on the couch for 20 minutes trying to calm down. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan asking if everything was okay. I called him back and explained what happened. He said I did the right thing calling the police and asked me to forward any threatening messages Larissa left. He also agreed with the officer about changing the locks. I looked up locksmiths in the area and found one who could come out that afternoon. The locksmith arrived 2 hours later and changed all 3 locks on the house. He also installed a security camera above the front door that connected to an app on my phone. The whole thing cost $400, but I felt safer knowing Larissa could not just walk in anymore. Mrs. Sison from next door came over while the locksmith was working. She asked if everything was all right after seeing the police cars. I explained that my sister showed up without permission and tried to take things that were not hers. Mrs. Sison said she would keep an eye on the property and call me if she saw Larissa around again. She gave me her phone number and I gave her mine. She said my grandmother talked about me all the time and she was glad the house went to someone who actually cared. Her words made my throat tight. Mrs. Sison went back to her house and I finished up with the locksmith. I tested all 3 new locks twice to make sure they worked. The security camera showed a clear view of the front porch and driveway. I felt angry that I had to do this because of my own sister. I also felt something else. I was starting to see patterns in Larissa's behavior that I used to excuse. She always got loud when she did not get her way. She always blamed other people for her problems. She always acted like the world owed her something. I used to think she was just sensitive and dramatic. Now I saw it was more than that. I drove back to my apartment that evening and called Charlotte the next morning. She had me come to her office to start setting up accounts. Charlotte walked me through each step of transferring assets into my name. We opened a new savings account for the $200,000. We set up a brokerage account for the investment portfolio. We started the paperwork to transfer the house deed. Charlotte explained that the investments were solid overall, but needed some rebalancing. She showed me charts and graphs breaking down what I owned. Some stocks were doing well, some bonds were stable, some mutual funds needed adjusting. With proper management, the investments would provide good passive income. The savings would cover property taxes and create an emergency fund. Charlotte asked what I wanted to do with the house. I said I was not sure yet. She said that was fine and I should take my time with that decision. The house was the most emotionally complex asset and there was no rush to sell. We could rent it out for steady income or I could keep it empty for now. Charlotte said the important thing was not to make big decisions while still processing grief. I appreciated her practical approach. She treated me like someone capable of managing money instead of someone who needed to hand it over to keep everyone else happy. We spent 3 hours going through paperwork and setting up accounts. By the end, I had a clear picture of what I owned and what my options were. I got home and found a long email from my mother waiting in my inbox. The subject line said, "We need to talk about your behavior." I almost deleted it without reading, but I opened it instead. My mother wrote 8 paragraphs detailing all the ways I was being selfish and hurting the family. She said I turned grandma against Larissa in her final years by visiting so much and poisoning her mind with complaints about childhood. She said a good son would put family harmony above money. She said I was becoming a bitter and greedy person she did not recognize. She said Larissa was struggling and needed help while I was comfortable and did not need the inheritance. She said if I really loved my family, I would split everything equally. The email was so full of lies and twisted facts that I read it 3 times to make sure I understood correctly. My mother actually blamed me for visiting my dying grandmother. She actually said I was greedy for accepting an inheritance given to me legally. She actually claimed I did not need money when I worked my way through college while they paid for Larissa. I saved the email to show Sabine at my next appointment. Then I blocked my mother's email address. I could not handle constant attacks every time I checked my messages. My phone immediately felt lighter without that source of stress. Nathan called me 2 days later with information about Larissa's financial situation. He said Dominic Fletcher filed documents in the will contest that revealed Larissa's debts. Larissa was not $30,000 in debt like my mother claimed. She was $60,000 in debt. The breakdown included credit cards, personal loans, and back rent on an apartment she got evicted from last year. Dominic was arguing that Grandma should have known Larissa needed financial help, and her failure to provide it showed she was not thinking clearly. Nathan said this actually helped our case. It proved Grandma made an informed decision not to enable Larissa's financial problems. Nathan had documentation showing Grandma knew about some of Larissa's debts because Larissa asked her for money to pay them. She refused and told her to get her life together. Nathan said the will contest was essentially doomed, but Larissa's lawyer was probably dragging it out to collect fees. He told me not to worry and let him handle all the legal work. I went back to Grandma's house the following weekend to continue going through her belongings. I found a file box in her bedroom closet labeled estate planning. Inside were letters between Grandma and Nathan going back 3 years. I sat on the floor and read through everything. Grandma documented 6 times that Larissa asked her for money. The first request was for $5,000 to pay credit card bills. The second was for $8,000 for gambling debts. The third was for $20,000 to cover rent and car payments. Each time, Grandma refused and wrote Nathan a letter explaining her reasoning. She said Larissa never learned from her mistakes. She said said giving her money would just enable more bad choices. She said she needed to face consequences and grow up. After each refusal, Larissa would get angry and not visit for months. Grandma wrote about feeling sad that her granddaughter only contacted her when she wanted money. She wrote about hoping she would change, but accepting that she probably would not. Her paper trail was incredibly thorough. She kept copies of text messages where Larissa asked for money. She kept notes about phone conversations. She even kept a log of her visits with dates and what they discussed. Nathan was right that the will contest was doomed. No judge would look at this evidence and think Grandma was confused or manipulated. She knew exactly what she was doing and why. I had my next appointment with Sabine 3 days later. I brought my mother's email and told Sabine about my guilt over having so much money while Larissa struggled. Sabine read the email and asked me what I thought about my mother's accusations. I said they were lies, but they still hurt. Sabine asked why I felt guilty about Larissa's financial problems. I said she was my sister and maybe I should help her. Sabine asked if giving Larissa money would actually help her. I thought about it and said probably not based on her history. Sabine said Larissa's struggles were consequences of her choices and my parents enabling her. She said giving her money would not teach her accountability. It would just delay her need to face reality. She asked me what Grandma would want me to do. I said Grandma would want me to honor her wishes and not enable Larissa's irresponsibility. Sabine said I was starting to understand that honoring Grandma meant accepting her wisdom about what Larissa actually needed. What she needed was not a financial bailout. What she needed was to learn how to take care of herself. I left that session feeling less guilty and more clear about my role in this situation. I took a week off work and drove back to Grandma's house to really go through everything. Being in her space made me feel connected to her. I could almost hear her voice in every room. I started in the living room with her bookshelves. She had books about history and gardening and cooking. I boxed up the ones I wanted to keep and marked others for donation. I moved to her bedroom and went through her closet. Most of her clothes would go to charity, but I kept a few sweaters that still smelled like her perfume. I found photo albums in the bottom drawer of her dresser. I sat on the bed and opened the first one. Pictures of me covered almost every page. Me as a baby, me starting kindergarten, me at my first piano recital, me graduating high school, me in my college dorm. Each photo had a note in Grandma's handwriting about what I accomplished or what milestone I reached. I looked through all 5 albums and found maybe 20 pictures of Larissa total. Most were from when we were very young. There were no notes about her activities or achievements. The physical evidence of our different relationships sat in my hands. She documented my life because she cared about my life. She barely documented Larissa because Larissa barely gave her anything to document. Amos Wilcox came by on Thursday afternoon to assess the house. I met him at the front door and he walked through every room taking notes. He checked the roof and the foundation and the plumbing. He said the property was in good condition overall. It would need some minor repairs, but nothing major. He said the house would sell quickly in the current market for around $300,000, or I could rent it out for about $1,800 a month, which would cover the property taxes and insurance with some left over. He asked what I was thinking about doing. I said I was not ready to decide yet. Amos said that was fine, and there was no rush. He gave me his card and said to call when I was ready to move forward either way. Having professional information helped me feel less overwhelmed. I was managing a property 4 hours from where I lived, but at least I had options and people to help me figure it out. That evening, my phone buzzed with text messages from Larissa one after another. The first one said I stole from her. The second one said I would regret this. The third one said karma would catch up to me eventually. The fourth one called me names I would not repeat. The fifth one threatened that I would pay for what I did. I watched them come in and felt my hands start to shake. Not from fear exactly, but from the realization that my sister was genuinely unstable. These were not the texts of someone having a bad day. These were threats from someone who could not control her anger. I took screenshots of every message. I forwarded them all to Nathan with a note explaining what was happening. He called me back within 10 minutes. He said he was forwarding everything to Dominic Fletcher with a warning. If Larissa continued harassing me, we would pursue a restraining order. Nathan asked if I felt safe. I said I did not know. He told me to document everything, keep my doors locked, and call the police if Larissa showed up at my apartment. The texts stopped after Nathan contacted Dominic. I checked my phone constantly for the next few days, waiting for more messages, but nothing came. I stayed alert anyway. Larissa had proven she could not handle losing, and I did not trust what she might do next. A letter arrived at my apartment 2 weeks later. The return address was a law office I did not recognize. I opened it and found a formal demand from my parents' lawyer. The letter said I owed Larissa $50,000 as compensation for emotional distress caused by the inheritance situation. It cited pain and suffering. It claimed my actions caused severe psychological harm to my sister. It demanded payment within 30 days, or they would file a lawsuit. I read the letter 3 times trying to understand how my parents thought this made sense. I forwarded it to Nathan immediately. He called me that evening. He said the demand had no legal basis whatsoever. He said emotional distress claims required proof of intentional infliction of harm, and my honoring Grandma's legal will did not qualify. He said he would respond to their lawyer, making clear that further frivolous demands would be considered harassment. He asked if I was okay. I said I was amazed at my family's continued entitlement. I said I could not believe they still thought they deserved money from an inheritance someone else specifically chose not to give them. Nathan said some people never learned to accept consequences. He said my parents spent decades creating this dynamic, and they could not admit their role in it now. He said his response would shut down this particular avenue of attack. I thanked him and hung up. I was not scared anymore. I was just tired of dealing with people who refused to see reality. Nathan called on a Friday morning with news. The probate court dismissed Larissa's will contest. The judge ruled that Grandma had documented mental capacity and detailed estate planning over several years. Her written explanations of her reasoning made her intentions clear and unambiguous. Larissa could appeal, but Nathan said no judge would overturn this decision. The evidence supporting Grandma's choices was too strong. I felt relief wash over me. The legal threat was over. Nathan said he would send me the official court documents, and we could close out the estate proceedings. He congratulated me on seeing this through despite my family's pressure. I thanked him for all his help and hung up. 2 days later, a voicemail from my father came through. His voice filled my living room with that tone he used when he thought he was being reasonable. He said the judge was wrong. He said the legal system was corrupt and failed to see the truth. He said I should still do the right thing and share with Larissa regardless of what some court decided. He said family was more important than money, and I was destroying us over greed. He said Grandma would be ashamed of me if she could see what I was doing. The voicemail ended, and I sat there holding my phone. My father genuinely could not understand why Grandma made the choice she did. He could not see the decades of favoritism that shaped our childhood. He could not admit that he and my mother created this situation by treating Larissa like a princess and me like an afterthought. I deleted the voicemail and blocked his number. The letter from Larissa's lawyer arrived on a Tuesday. I saw the return address and felt my stomach drop before I even opened it. I sat down at my kitchen table and read it twice to make sure I understood correctly. The letter said Larissa was withdrawing all legal challenges to Grandma's will and would pursue no further action regarding the inheritance. It was formal and brief with no explanation for the change. I called Nathan immediately. He said he was not surprised. He said Larissa's case had no merit from the beginning, and her lawyer probably told her continuing would just waste more money on legal fees. Nathan suspected Larissa either accepted she could not win or more likely ran out of money to keep paying her lawyer to fight a losing battle. Either way, the legal threat was completely over. I paid off my car loan that week. The balance was $11,000, and I transferred the money from my inheritance account without even blinking at the amount. 2 days later, I paid off my student loans, another $18,000 that I had been chipping away at for 6 years. I logged into both accounts and stared at the zero balances. No debt, no monthly payments hanging over my head, no interest accumulating while I tried to get ahead. I owned my car outright. My education was paid for. I had savings and investments and a good salary from my job. For the first time in my adult life, I was not just surviving. I was secure. I thought about Larissa and her $60,000 in debt and her eviction and her pattern of asking other people to bail her out. I thought about how different our lives turned out because I learned to work hard and manage money while she learned that someone would always rescue her. Grandma saw that difference. She saw that I built something stable through effort and responsibility, while Larissa built nothing but expected everything. Her will was not cruel or unfair like my parents claimed. It was an honest recognition of the choices we each made and the people we each became. My sister demanded my inheritance because she was the only girl in the family. In the end, she got exactly what she earned: zero.